Welcome, everyone, to the Cup of Coffee podcast with me, your host, Tom Dillon. This has been recorded live at our weekly online meeting and broadcast around the world. Today's topic is planning for an election year with lovely Linda Wright. Before we start, I'd like to say, by way of a disclaimer, that today is a wonderful discussion, but that nothing said here constitutes financial advice. You should always take professional advice before investing your hard-earned cash. There may be the odd unplanned swear word along the way as well. The form for today is that Linda will speak to us for a while, and then we'll have some questions from the floor. So get those ready. Linda Wright is a multi-faceted planning professional, as well as time spent working in the public sector, development, management, housing, telecommunications, and planning policy. The USP on a CV is 6 years on the island of Bermuda as a planning officer. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning. How are we all?
I think we're all well. I certainly am.
Excellent.
How are you?
I'm very well. When I thought about this title for this, planning for an election year, I've reread it and I thought that sounds very political.
Sure.
Like I'm planning to run for some sort of election.
Yeah. Vote Labour.
So I apologise if anybody got excited and thought this was going to be a political podcast. It isn't. I do not have a political bone in my body.
No.
I will criticise, slag off all political parties equally.
Yes.
And I'm not partisan for any party.
I wonder whether like I'm hoping that just by mentioning the election year thing, which by the way was Linda's idea, not mine, but it's a good idea. We might just boost the numbers of people looking for political Barbary, and then they'll learn some planning along the way.
That would be good.
That would be a win, wouldn't it? Why? Well, maybe you'll come on to this. Maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves here. But why is it being an election year relevant, or is it just a hook? Is it not relevant at all? Or do you think it is? Do you think it changes the planning landscape a bit?
I think it all gets a bit. There's a madness element comes into it.
Okay.
And there's also the whiff of desperation especially with the Tories at the moment, whose numbers, the ratings have plummeted, and there's a whiff of desperation in trying to pander to the electorate. Now, of course, and again, this is not a political thing, but there is a NIMBYist issue about a lot of the Tories who've got very expensive houses, very nicely set up, thank you, and want to protect everything around them. They live in the middle of the green belt, and they don't want any houses built anywhere near. So that doesn't sit well, unfortunately, for the Tory in-house government at the moment. Doesn't sit terribly well in that we have a housing crisis at the moment. And so what they're trying to do is do lots of conversions, commercial buildings to residential, lots of conversions without sort of going anywhere near the greenbelt, and that'll be all right because the Tory voters, Keir Starmer is not exactly what you might call a blue-collar worker and never has been, but I'm thinking now, my God, Linda, this is going to go out on YouTube. I'm going to get trolled, aren't I? I'm going to get hate mail. Anyhow, I will try and insult everybody equally. Sure. Don't get me started on Gorgeous George.
Oh.
So the reason that I put this planning for an election year is it's almost like there's knee-jerk reactions to things. And it's almost like, oh, right, quick, let's get some new regs out that will boost our popularity. And that is not the way to do planning. Now, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff, case in point, the National Planning Policy Framework has been in consultation for 12 months. And then all of a sudden, poof, there's a big announcement. We're going to, it came out December. I know I've said planning for an election year, which is kind of this year, but it tips over into the last couple of months of last year as well. So the National Planning Policy Framework was big. I mean, this is so Tory. There was a big announcement saying, ooh, we're going to concentrate on brownfield. Really? I thought we already were. It's a bit like this whole thing of the emperor's new clothes, and everybody's gathering round and going, oh yes, don't you look lovely? And there's, Michael Gove standing there naked. Oh, no, I can't get that image out of my brain now. But it's all like that. It's, you know, it's rebadging things where they're not actually saying anything new. It's a bit right. I'm going to go a bit off piece now. One morning,
were we ever on piste? I'm not sure. When were we on?
One morning this week, I was in the car, and I don't often travel to places these days, but I was in the car and I had the radio on in the morning, and I've heard this all over the place. This is how mad I think it's a loose comparison, but this is how mad I think planning in an election year is. On the radio, and I've heard this before, and it's all over the place. Beyonce, God love her. Beyonce doing country. Now, I'm sorry, she's got this #1 song out called Texas Hold'em. Now, this is not what we expect from the girl who gave us If You Put a Ring on It and all of that sort of stuff. She's doing country, and it's a £30 million selling song. But Beyonce and country don't tend to go in the same genre. Now, I'm not saying that we can't, you know, jump over barriers and go into different genres. Absolutely. But there's people now, the youth of society, are now all over TikTok doing line dancing dances. And you think, it's a very strange world, because there's all these hip and cool dudes doing line dancing that they would never have been caught dead doing. You know, a couple of years ago, it's something that their mum and dad did or something. So this is what I'm saying. With planning in an election year, do not expect the expected, but equally don't not expect something. That's a double negative and it sounds grammatically horrible, but you know what I mean. Because there are certain things that have come up. Right, and let's just go backwards a little bit into November.
Are we going back on piste?
Yeah, ish. I'll put my skis back on.
At least, yeah. I quite like it off piste though, to be honest. So by all means, stay off if you want. Up to you.
The off piste bit was Beyonce. So and I mean, I'm sorry, but country, it's a fab song, and all the TikTok dances are fabulous. Oh, you've got to listen to it. Texas Hold'em, it is brilliant.
Yeah,
as only Beyonce can do. But it's like, you know, the Beyoncés, the Adeles, the Taylor Swifts, and this one. These are mega women. And they're just fantastic. Nothing to do with planning. Anyhow, right. In November, in the autumn statement, this is something that I will say because property investors are going to be interested in this. And back on piece. In the autumn statement, Jeremy Hunt, love him, announced, oh, we're going to be bringing in permitted development rights to change one house into two. And I'm going, what? What are you talking about, Jeremy? Who's told you to say this? Shush. Anyhow, the number of calls I've had, when is it coming in? Oh, can I do this? Permitted development. I'm going to change my house into 2 flats. And you think, stop. Now, far be it from me to say that it was just Jeremy Hunt flapping his lips for a soundbite. I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure he was advised by the backroom boys who were all about, and girls, who were all about 14 in Whitehall. So we've got this thing that is hanging in the air. Convert your house into 2 flats or convert it into 2 houses. And you think, okay, fine. So for all of you people out there who are getting excited about this may come up because we're probably looking at an autumn election. This may come up this year. But there is no consultation on it. There's been no consultation issued. Now, consultations tend to run at least 8 weeks. So there's nothing happening until May. Then government have to look at the consultation responses, and that will take months. And then they'll all go for the summer recess. So we're then into September, October. So, you know, seriously, do not think that this is going to go anywhere fast, because it's not. And it really annoys me that you get these headline ripping things and it's all over Google or other internet browsers. And you think, and I've got people contacting me saying, how do I do it? And right, let me just say this. It was badged as permitted development. And this will bring me on to my other stuff. Badged as permitted development. It is not going to be permitted development. Honestly, I will eat my hat if it is. It is going to be a prior approval procedure, because if it's full permitted development, you're not going to be able to control the sizes of apartments. As we all know, we now have the nationally described space standards, which most councils adhere to. Some councils don't bother. Other councils have their own larger standards, but the majority, nationally described space standards, have to be complied with, especially for prior approval applications. So I expect that even though it's badged as permitted development, it's not going to be fully permitted. And I wish central government would stop calling the prior approval rights, the procedure, permitted development, because it's just not. You have to apply to the council, and the council can refuse these things, because lots of people come to me and say, oh, it's just a rubber stamp job. No. What gave you that idea? So can be refused. So that let's bust that particular myth, right? And we got something coming in from Yogesh.
Yeah, sorry, you mentioned that some councils don't adhere to minimum space standards. Which councils? Yeah. Well, how do I find out who they are?
There's 300 and odd. What do you think I am? Wikipedia.
There can't be many, though. There's probably only one or two, aren't there?
I don't know. When I say don't adhere to, I don't mean lower, I mean higher. They have their own space standards. So you're not going to get away with a one bed, one person flat for anything less than 37 square meters.
Oh, okay. So not the other way around. So
no, never in a million years. They can go higher, which has caught a lot of people out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yogesh is all about lower.
I'm glad it's
you end up cave dwelling, and you end up it's battery chicken living. Please don't do that.
I get my thanks a lot. Thank you.
Sorry, what was that?
I think Yogesh was saying it's all great. Yeah, he understands, and he's he's very respectful of everyone's space and so on. And let's carry on. I think that was what broadly it.
Right. Okay. So that was Jeremy in November last year. God love him. Now, I'm going to say this just in case people missed it. In December last year, all of the fees went. 6th of December, all of the fees, the planning application fees increased. Yes, we all know about that. They all went up by 35%.
Ooh.
Householder application fees went up by 25%. So if you're looking, you be very careful if you're looking at how much planning application is going to cost you, because if you find an old planning fees, so as from December 2023, 35% increase. Now the intention is that this will all be spent in planning departments, and it's going to involve more resources. Not entirely convinced myself, but there we go. So that's the fees. Now, the one thing, is anybody interested in short-term let serviced accommodation? Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, we're getting some nods.
Nods, right, excellent. Right, so there was an announcement. Please. Yes, all right, thank you. There was an announcement that, and it isn't only they keep coming out with these announcements and there's nothing to back them up. Short-term lets this has been rattling around for a while, and I have been banging on for about 5 years to anybody who will listen, which is probably not many, about there should be a dedicated use class order, because planning doesn't keep up with trends, and the service accommodation trend has been big. Airbnb and all that has been big for a few years now, but planning is a bit like, I always say, it's a bit like once you've got an oil tanker mid-Atlantic and somebody gets on the radio and says, you've got to turn around. Well, it's taking weeks to turn this puppy around. So planning's a bit like that. It does not react quickly to, possibly not even logically, to some things, but it doesn't react quickly. So it's not trend-based, and it shouldn't be, to be perfectly honest. But the service accommodation thing has been here now. It's causing huge problems in places like the historic cities like Bath, Chester, York. It's creating massive problems in London, because what's happening is people are taking what would be a permanent residence out of the residential housing market and they're Airbnb-ing it. So it's adding to the housing stress in places like the Greater London boroughs. So there was an announcement that said short-term let is what the council, if you're looking for this on Google and you want to do a bit of research, and I'm sorry, I can't go into depth about a lot of this stuff. It's just a skim across the top and give you an idea of what to look for. So service accommodation, short-term let. They're talking about allowing permitted development rights. Now, there was a massive collective intake of breath for that. What? No, but it's to allow people whose sole or main residence is they can let them out as an Airbnb type of use for up to 90 days. So that's the permit. This is what it's proposed to be. I've not seen, I like it to be in black and white, preferably in somebody's blood, but we've not seen any of that yet. There's just been this announcement. So permitted development rights for sole or main residence for 90 days. For example, if you've got a house, you say, I'm going to go and stay, I've got an apartment, I'm going to rent an Airbnb in Spain for 3 months. But in order to recoup from my house, the idea of letting somebody live in my house is my idea of hell, quite frankly. But if that's what people want to do, fine. If they have a tidier house than I do, that's absolutely fine. So you can do that for 90 days without requiring planning permission, permitted development rights. There's also going to be a new use class. You will all know about Class C3 residential, Class C4 HMOs. There's now going to be, probably, it's not been highlighted, Class C5, I expect, is what it's going to be. So it's going to be a dedicated serviced accommodation, short-term let. When is this going to come in? If you want to take a house and convert it to a full-time Airbnb, you are going to need planning permission. Or I shouldn't use Airbnb because other platforms are available, but short-term let. There is also going to be a register of these properties. So you're going to have to, like the HMO register, you're going to have to register with these things. Now, how effective that's going to be, because I'm not entirely convinced how effective the HMO register is, but that's what they're proposing. And they're saying if you have an existing short-term let service accommodation, it will automatically be reclassified. So you don't have to do a retrofit and say, oh, well, I need planning permission for this, or can you, a certificate of lawfulness to confirm it's permitted development. They will automatically be reclassified. That makes me twitch, to be perfectly honest, because you're going to have to keep absolutely pristine records of when these things, when the use of these started. So that would be my advice for that. So it's touted that this is going to come out this summer. Now, again, bearing in mind what I've said before on politics and sittings of the various houses and all of this sort of stuff, is it going to come out this summer? I don't know. But it's there, it's in the ether, it's going backwards and forwards. Will it or won't it?
Isu's got a question. Is now a good time for Isu's question?
Yeah.
Isu.
Hi, Linda.
Hiya.
During COVID, we had put in planning application for a HMO, and with it, we got permission, and then the local authority decided that they'd made an administrative error within 42 days. So that was rejected, and there was a case between the court, the Manchester City Council, and the Crown kind of thing. We then applied for the house to be converted into 2, flats.
Yeah. And
that was rejected. Now, the area, we're refurbishing it into a 4-bed house. But the problem is somewhere along the right, years ago, it had a covenant in to say it's only for family let, let to be families. Now, obviously, we're thinking about turning it into a short-term let. Where will we stand?
Good grief, there's a mix of stuff in there. Right. First of all, yeah, you finally got to the short-term lets, because I'm thinking, where are we going with HMO?
Yeah.
And I'd love to know what mistake Manchester meant, because you can't just rescind a planning application once it's been granted.
They reckoned it was an admin error.
Bullshit. If they've issued a decision notice, that's a decision notice. Oh no, I'd have had a bit of a rant at that, I think. Anyhow, so an HMO. So Manchester historically, I mean, Manchester have had a citywide Article 4 direction removing permitted development rights for HMOs since 2012. So, you know, they know how to do this. They're pretty hot on this now. There's not many HMOs get approved in Manchester, although there have been a few that have come through. I don't know what the reasons for refusal were, and I don't know the case. But so if you want to use it as a short-term let, if you are going to use the whole house, under these new regulations, allegedly, you would need planning permission. If it is going to be someone's sole residence, then, and you're letting it out for 90 days, then you've got permitted development rights. But at the minute, it sounds like you want to use all 4 rooms, let it out, each room for serviced accommodation. Yeah?
She's
right.
Nodding.
Okay. Now, you also said, where will I stand with that? So that's the answer to that. Now, if there's a legal covenant, this is nothing to do with planning. If the legal covenant says that it can only be let out to a family, you would be in breach, oh, good grief. You would be in breach of that legal covenant. It's nothing to do with planning. Planning will not get involved. The planning department might grant you planning permission, but it still means that you would be in breach of the covenant. So you have to approach your solicitors if you want to use it as non-family rental. You'd have to approach your solicitors to get the covenant removed. That could be a very expensive process. And it depends on how long ago the covenant was put on. If it's been on for 50 years, they might say, oh, go on, take it off. It doesn't make sense anymore. But you're going to have to get that done, because nothing to do, you could still get planning permission approved, but the covenant is a legal matter, and you need to speak to your solicitor.
Yeah, it was years ago, you know, and before we bought the house in 1986.
Yeah, can we move on from this, Esther?
Yeah,
because
sure. Yeah.
the covenant is a legal matter. It's nothing to do with planning, so you need to speak to a solicitor. Is that all right? Does that answer your other planning bits? Excellent, thank you. And because Tom's telling me I've got 10 minutes, and I've got a list here. Right. Now, one of the other things, I'm not going to talk to you about that because you don't really care. One of the other things that, so I've done, I was writing this at midnight last night because I suddenly thought, oh, I've not decided what I'm going to talk about. Right, now, Class MA changes. Listen up, people. So, Class MA. Now, Class MA is what was Class O. It's all very confusing. And Class MA is the new Class E use class, business, service, and commercial. You can convert those buildings, commercial buildings, to residential, but they've widened the scope under Class E in the new use classes order from 2020. All got changed, not been changed for 30 years, all got changed.
Hang on, just in case it's not just me who's going to be confused by that. You've mentioned Class, I've got Class MA, which used to be Class O, but then we mentioned in Class E. Where's Class E coming to?
Okay, Class MA is under the General Permitted Development Order, and it allows, under the prior approval procedure, it allows the conversion of certain commercial buildings, a whole raft of them, to residential, to flats and houses and things.
Right.
Class O was the old, under the General Permitted Development Order, was the old class under which you could do that. That's now gone, it's now Class MA. Then Class E is under the use classes order. It's the classification. So Class E, there was a massive change which covers all business, service and commercial buildings that can then be converted to residential under Class MA. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. There's a whole raft of stuff, but there was big excitement when a consultation came out, and there was a consultation that had a raft of things on it. What they've started doing is they've started cherry picking things off that consultation, and they're not going through the entire consultation. So it's a bit confusing because you have to keep going backwards. So what they chose was to make changes to Class MA. Now, Class MA previously had a size limit. And we all know that size matters, don't we? Anyhow, right. So there was a size limit. Sorry, smutty. There was a size limit. The size limit was you could convert commercial, business or service uses up to 1,500 square meters. Yeah. What they were proposing under the consultation was that they were going to double that to 3,000 square meters. And they were going, one of the criteria was that a building had to have been vacant for 3 months prior to you submitting a planning application. Right, so the size was going to be doubled. They were going to remove the vacancy requirement. Thank you, 5 minutes. I'm going to just ignore that. It's am I not on till 10:30?
You are, but there's questions backing up from here to Christmas, so I'm trying to leave some time for.
Oh, is that? Okay. I thought, hang on a minute, he's being a bit mean here. Anyhow, so where was it? So this was the consultation that came out, and in fact, what has come out in the statutory instrument that is the regs that comes out came out on the 5th of March. So we are nothing if not bang up to date and current, because that was what, a week or so ago, 10 days ago. 5th of March came out. Class MA changes. Size limit. There isn't one. It's been removed. You can take any size of building to convert it. It provided it falls in, it has been used for Class E for the previous 2 years, and convert it to residential. There's no size limit. That's a massive change, quite a bit of a surprise. Because this is part of what I was saying. Central government are hanging their hats on this commercial to residential conversions being the savior of the housing crisis. It's going to deliver all of the houses that we need, which is, can I swear? Bullshit. It's absolute, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. There was some sort of assessment that from 2015, these conversions had provided 6% of the housing delivery. Oh, come on. You know, what you need to be doing is granting planning permission for large houses rather than, there was a KC put something on LinkedIn the other day, and there was a raft of things that allocated sites for 300, 400 and 500 houses were allocated in the local plan. They were recommended for approval by the planners. They went to committee, they got overturned, they got refused. So they're now in an appeal cycle, which is just nonsense. It shouldn't be happening. So everybody has got very excited saying, I can convert commercial, business or service building, no size limit, and it doesn't have to have been vacant for 3 months prior to the application. So everybody's got very excited about that. Now, I need to be an old curmudgeon here and say, hang on a minute, everybody's going, whoo, size limits are off. Oh, don't need to be vacant for 3 months. Just remember what Class MA, conversion of commercial, service and business to residential, also what the other criteria are. It's a prior approval application you have to submit to the council. You have to convince the council that all of the following issues are okay. Transport impacts, land contamination, flood risk, noise from other commercial premises on the future occupiers, if it's in a conservation area, what impact will it have on the character of that conservation area if you're converting, you know, ground floor type stuff? It has to have adequate levels of natural light. Now, lots of people have come to me and said, oh, Debenhams stores in town, where, hey, we're going to convert them all to residential. No, because you're not going to be able to get light in, because these stores tended to have narrow frontages and long, you know, went a long way back and then had windows on the back. So you're probably not going to be able to get adequate levels of natural light. And the reason that that came in is because people were making bedrooms and living rooms with no windows in them, which is just disgusting. So residential in a heavy industrial area, what impact is that going to have either on the occupiers or on the future viability of the industrial area? It's a big one, that. And also loss of services such as a nursery or a health centre, which doesn't always, you know, it applies in a small percentage of cases. You also have to remember not only adequate levels of natural daylight, but you have to remember nationally described space standards. Your absolute minimum is 37 square meters. If you can't get that in, they're just going to reject your prior approval application anyhow. I've not got time to talk about the National Planning Policy Framework. There are modifications to Article 4 directions, which again is probably not something that's going to immediately impact you. There is a latest consultation, I'll do this very quickly, the latest consultation which runs until the 9th of April, so it's still in consultation and people will be responding to it, that talks about increasing householder permitted development rights, just actually making a lot of alterations and tweaks, and I'm not convinced because I think it's going to have an impact on neighbours. There's upward extensions is also going to be altered. The demolition and rebuild of buildings. Previously, it had to be done on the same footprint. It's probably going to be that you can go outside of that footprint now. And there's also things like electric charging and air source heat pumps, which we don't need to get involved in. But that is a current consultation that something is going to come out of that. And then the National Planning Policy Framework, it goes on for days. Concentration on brownfield land. Oh, please. We've been doing that for decades. Right. I think I will bring it to a close there, Tom, as I'm probably just about out of time.
Certainly are, but you've done very well, and I've, as always, thoroughly enjoyed the presentation there and the chat. Without further ado, make sure we get the most out of the time. Yogesh, are you there? How's your connection? I know you had at least one question, possibly more.
Just one. That's okay.
Go for it.
Hello.
Hiya.
How are you doing? Has there any talk about community infrastructure levy been changed or has been changed? Because I believe you can only charge it when there's a new dwelling. Have they said it's going to cost more, change the rules, anything like that, or was there no talk of that? And
Right.
I'll leave that alone.
Right, your signal's going in and out a bit, Yogesh, but I think from that, you were asking about the community infrastructure levy. Yeah?
Yeah, it applies to new dwellings, and I was just wondering if they're going to change it.
No, it doesn't just apply to new dwellings. It depends on what the council have put on their charging schedule, and I mean, there's a basic overview of the community infrastructure levy, which has been tweaked every year since it came out. To answer your question, yes, the whole community infrastructure levy system, which doesn't really work well and is not really fit for purpose, is talked about being revisited and revised as part of the Levelling Up Act that came in last year. So, but that, to actually change the community infrastructure levy is a massive task. It is going to need the Levelling Up Act is going to be is going to be the overarching act. It needs a massive amount of supporting legislation underneath it. And part of that supporting legislation is going to be the community and infrastructure levy. They're talking about combining the community infrastructure levy with Section 106 agreements and bringing them all in together. They tried this when I used to work for the Home Builders Federation a long time ago now. They tried this and it all fell apart because it became too cumbersome and too complicated. But that is what is proposed. I predict this could take years before it comes to fruition because it's quite a complicated process. But don't think that community infrastructure levy is just for new buildings. It's not.
Do you mind clarifying that? Because I really thought it was. What else?
No, it's not. You need to look at. Don't think if you've looked at one council and that is what their community. No, every single council will have a different way. It tends to be anything more than 100 square meters, but it can be an extension on a house. I had one in Bromley that there was an extension on a house. They had to, so an extension, yes, all right, you can argue that's new build, but it's not just new build houses. It can also, for some councils, it can also be conversions. So you have to be careful. You have to look at that very carefully and look at each council because they each bring in. And the other stupid thing is that community infrastructure levy is not yet mandatory. So not every council will have it. Manchester don't because they say they bring in enough revenue from their Section 106 agreements. And also if you're in the London boroughs, there is a London mayoral community infrastructure levy that is to pay for the Crossrail project. If you then go and do some development in a council, for example, Bromley, who have their own community infrastructure levy, there is a possibility you would have to pay both. Well, you certainly have to pay the mayoral. So there's a possibility you'd have to pay the local and the mayoral in the Greater London boroughs. So you just need to be aware of that. Okay, but there's nothing definitive yet. It's all talked about and set out in the Levelling Up Act, but it's not come into legislation yet.
That was interesting. Thank you, Yogesh. Yogesh's connection is a bit dodgy, so it's difficult to work out whether he's looking surprised or just pleased that he's got information. But I think it's just because he's on a bit of a delay. Thank you, Linda. We've got a question from me. So before we get onto that, anyone else got questions here? Obviously, raise your hand or do whatever, shout and scream, and we'll get to as many as we can. Meanwhile, I wanted to go general, which was what opportunities do you think are out there, or and this can be stuff that's been there for years, doesn't have to be new stuff, or is coming in all new stuff, where you think small to medium property investors, which is most of our listenership, I think, are maybe missing out on or aren't aware of that they could be getting more out of. The one that comes to mind that people I think are aware of is stuff like when you've got a shop and you can convert above that into 2 flats or this kind of thing. Is there anything where you sometimes think, oh, this is there, and it's weird that not more people are taking advantage of this? Because then people, I think, people might be interested in that.
Just to backtrack, if you've got a shop and you've got floors or a floor above it, it used to be completely permitted development that you could put 2 flats above. It's not permitted development anymore. Well, it's badged as, but you need to submit a prior approval application for this. Now, where previously you could probably have done a 30 square meter flat, maybe to just get it over the mortgage threshold. You can't now. You need to submit a prior approval application. Prior approval applications require that you comply with the nationally described space standards. So what actually the central government had to do it, but they've kind of shot themselves in the foot, because whereas a lot of these properties would have put 2 smaller flats in, they can now only fit 1.
That makes them.
So it hasn't really, it's not been thought through, but it's their prior approval procedure. You can't just go ahead and put flats above shops now. Honestly, I can't say, oh, you need to be looking out for this, because it depends on what kind of property you've got. It depends on how risk averse you are. It depends on what you are looking to put in your portfolio. Do you want residential? Do you want commercial? There is I've not had time to talk about it, but there is, as of the 9th of February, Michael Gove revisited the Article 4 directions that had, mainly in the London boroughs, but not only in the London boroughs, where councils had removed, by Article 4 direction, had removed permitted development rights to convert some buildings from Class E to residential. And what had happened was they weren't specific enough, and they were geographically too wide. So these have been reduced and cut back. So it would be worthwhile having a look at those. If your building has popped out, you can then possibly use the prior approval process to convert to residential. So that, I know that's fairly whistle stop and it's generic, but that's one of the things that you might be able to take advantage of, depending on where you've got property and whether but it's not just it's mainly the London boroughs, but not just the London boroughs, because they'd sort of done sprawling lines around Article 4 areas, and I think as part of this, trying to get the housing delivery, although not trying very hard, and in my view, trying in the wrong direction. They've said, no, we need to make these Article 4 areas smaller. So they have been reduced. So a whole street kind of popped out. Now, if you've got a property in there, you can arguably go for the prior approval procedure, which you can't at the moment, if it was in, and you can convert to residential, if that is what you want to do. So it's difficult to say, because you see, what you're going to be able to do in Birmingham, you're probably not going to be able to do in the Cotswolds. You know, it's that kind of thing. So it just depends on where you've got property and what your strategy is.
Interesting. Very good. Isa, you had based on the success of your first question, you've been allowed another one. What have you got for us? You're muted for a start.
Yeah. Hi. We have got a detached garden from the house. There's a road in between the house and the garden, and we applied for planning permission to put a one-bed house in. Got rejected. What would the chances of us sort of putting up a garage on that land be? Do you know?
How long is a piece of string? Without knowing the site, without knowing why it was refused in the first place, a house comes with it garden requirement, outdoor private amenity space, maneuverability, bin storage, cycle storage, car parking, maneuvering, not reversing into the road, all sorts of things. If you're putting a garage on there that is linked to the main house, if you're thinking put a double garage on there and then we'll convert it later to a bungalow, yeah, the council are probably going to see through that. But if you can put a double garage, there shouldn't be any reason why you shouldn't put a garage on a single or double garage on there, provided that you're not reversing into a busy road or anything like that. But again, that's sort of giving private planning advice for a site that I haven't seen.
Sure. Does it make any? Am I thinking that site? I don't realize we don't want to get too much into the long grass on this, but just out of interest, am I thinking that site maybe is in Snowdonia National Park? You see?
No, that's in Denton in Manchester.
Oh, Manchester. Okay, well, that's
the Tameside.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's yeah.
What was? Sorry, Tom. Can I just ask? I'm curious now. This is terrible. Esu, what were the reasons for refusal for the house?
They said that that in the area there's not many. It's a garden basically. It's not a house area, and the funny thing is, there's a whole row of gardens there's like you can drive through at the back, and then there's gardens. There's loads of gardens at the back. I can't remember the rejection, but it was about 3-4 years ago they rejected it.
Okay. No, it sounds like pattern of development, and it also sounds like if they open the floodgates, everybody else will want a house on their garden on that side of the road as well.
I think that might have been the issue.
They shouldn't refuse it on those grounds, but the fact is, it could kick something off.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, that just about excitingly, it's always whistle stop with Linda, and that's one thing I really enjoy. What's your prediction for the election, Linda?
No.
In more practical news, I know you've been doing different ventures. If people have listened to this and gone, "Oh, Linda seems to know what she's talking about with this planning lark," I'd like to get in touch with her. How can people do that?
Do you want me to put it in the chat?
Yes, but people are lazy. So is there a way you can read out so people listen to this?
My email address is just Linda, Linda, at Katana Planning. Katana is a Japanese samurai sword, double-edged. I thought it would be good for slashing through the planning red tape. It's Linda at katanaplanning.co.uk. I'll put my number on here as well.
Yeah, cool.
Linda
Katana for those
with Angela Rayner. Oh no, she don't. No, don't do that.
Don't mention Angela Rayner. Katana for those who don't know Japanese is Kilo Alpha Tango Alpha November Alpha.
Yes.
That's what people are trying to spell
as in, is it the same as banana but with a K?
Oh,
no, it's not. No, there's a T. No, sorry. No, ignore that. Ignore that. That's my phone number. Do you know what? I was supposed to be having a new website done.
Oh.
But I'm just thinking, why?
It's so 20th century, isn't it? Nobody's doing
well, I just think I'm not bothering, to be honest. I'm gonna go feral.
Yeah, I think
do you know what? Contact me on LinkedIn. That's my number, that's my email address. No website. I think
you should do. We'll for anyone listening, we'll pop obviously the details as usual with the podcast episode. I think you should, instead of doing a website, maybe just do some TikTok line dances. Hold up some sort of contact information.
Yeah, with my fingers in my belt loops. Yeah. You'd want your money back.
Smashing. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. For those listening to the podcast and watching us, and really appreciate, obviously, our special thanks to Linda Wright for taking the time to speak to us today.
You're welcome. Lovely to see you all. Thank you very much.